Yeah, I slept on the sidewalk. You said because I wanted my head up. I was tired of my head sticking down there. So this text talks about, and to do that, you have to be a hard head. And so I know these guys are hard-headed. It takes one to know one. So anyway, let's take a look at the text, because somebody does it in the Bible, and maybe some of you know the text. Let's take a look at Genesis chapter 28. Then Jacob departed from Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and spent the night there because the sun had set, and he took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head. See, if you just sleep out in the dirt, then your head here gets, all dirty, and then it get bugs crawling in your ears or something. So this guy, he was spiritual though. So we got a couple of spiritual people in here that did that. So he took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head, and he lay down in that place. And he had a dream. Now, this is not like other dreams. We all dream. We have these little dreams or something. It's not talking about that type of dream. Sometimes we have bad dreams because we watch a scary movie. Have you had one of those movies where the monsters are chasing you and you can't run fast? You ever done that? And you're just running. You're trying to run fast. That monster's catching you and you can't do it. Well, it's not one of those dreams. This is a dream from God. The Bible talks about dreams and visions and revelations and that. And so this is one that Jacob had. And it says, so he had a dream. Behold, a ladder was set on the earth with its top reaching all the way into heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give it to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. Same thing he told Abraham, exactly there. And in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. People have asked me many times, say, what is this deal? Previous chapter where he obeys his mother and not his father, so he's a deceiver like. But his mother had the pronouncement of that she would have two children, this battle that was going on. You know why she was carrying the two children? And he said, then the older shall serve the younger. So she was being obedient to God. And here very clearly now, the next chapter, Abraham, God is telling him, just like Abraham, just like your father Isaac, see, the seed is passing and the blessing is passing through you. So God was approving here of at least, maybe not of exactly what happened in the previous chapter, but is saying very clearly it's passing through you. You're the blessed one now. So I'll keep you, behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. Will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I've done what I have promised you. So here's a promise. The promise of Abraham is passing through this line. We call them the patriarchs. They're the first leading fathers of the faith of the Old Testament. Okay, so you note them as the patriarchs. And it's passing through. Now, Jacob's going to respond here, and we're going to take a look at his response and see his act of obedience here. Go ahead. So Jacob rose early in the morning, took the stone that he had put under his head, set it up as a pillar so it was lying down flat, and he took it up and set it up, and he poured oil on its top. He called the name of that place Bethel, however previously the name of the city had been Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in the safety, then the Lord will be my God. This stone which I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. So this is establishing, and our topic is this, is establishing the principle of giving. In chapter 14, and in this chapter is the first mention in the Bible of really giving. It's talking about a tenth which is a tithe, and that tithe and a tenth is the same. We're going to examine this from a different approach from what you've probably heard. This actually comes, this Old Testament passage is talking about a custom that they had, the Semites had in that area, and the area had. When somebody was gracious to you and you were going to give them a gift, or you were responding to that, a lot of times what they did is they gave a tenth. It was a custom, it was a practice. When you were maybe under somebody of authority and somebody of superior, you showed what you're acknowledging your relationship to them, and that you maybe their protection of you. If it was somebody that was a band of people, and that you gave them a tenth, and it showed showed your thanksgiving, it showed your appreciation, it showed that you were understood your relationship with them, and it was you blessing them because of their having protected you or been with you. So it was a custom. So it starts from a common practice of respect and acknowledgement of your relationship. Everybody get? So get this, giving is a matter of relationship. And giving to God is. See, when we give to somebody and we know somebody's suffering, and we give to them, we help them with food, or maybe we give to them and they're lacking money, that's relational. Everybody follow that? It's a relationship that you're established. So giving to God begins with establishing that concept as a relationship. Now, reason book of Genesis is so important on some of these issues that we've been covering for us as Christians is this. Genesis means beginnings, so it's the book of beginnings, and it tells us, and we've gone through this so many times, I'm not going to go through the list, but all the beginnings with God, beginning of creation, beginning of man, beginning of sin, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here we go. We're going through this now. And so this is, and it's called, there's another word called the doctrine of first mention. Okay, you study theology, that's what it's called. So, doctrine of first mention, what is it? We covered it really in Genesis chapter 15:6, and he, referring to Abraham, believed in the Lord and reckoned to him as righteousness. A very famous verse. That's the first mention of faith, or belief. So you take it from that, it's also here in Genesis chapter 14, where Abraham gave a tenth to Melchizedek, and here, then in this text, and so what you have is you have the first mention of the doctrine of giving. And what you want to get out of this, it was relational. It had to do with relationship. It had to do with thanksgiving. And it had to do with your understanding of the provision that the superior had done for you. So you're giving it kind of, again, out of thanksgiving. We follow me? Everybody get this? Very important. Because we're going to find some principles as we go on that establish it a little different. Now, not different, it adds to it. The doctrine of first mention states this, and then as we read through the Bible and study that doctrine, you begin to understand all that God has for us in that. Okay, all the meaning, the depths of that. Just to see one, I think we gave you Deuteronomy 14:22. Do we have that? You shall surely tithe all the produce from what you sow, which comes out of the field every year. So I just wanted to one verse. This is one verse from the book of Deuteronomy that is established as law. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy is the Pentateuch. It's called the law. It's the book, five books of Moses. Moses is the author of them. So that kind of just sets as a standard. Here's just one example. We find tithe in Genesis. We find tithe in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And you see the teaching of that all growing and establishing under law, okay? We see some throughout the other books, historical books. We see some in the poetical books and some of the prophetic books. Let's take the last book of the Old Testament. And I just want to establish something because we're going to come to something I hope you really like. We're going to get there. I'm just a little slow sometimes of getting there. Malachi chapter 3. Will a man rob God? Yet you are robbing me, but you say, how have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings, is his answer. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the whole nation of you. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, so that there may be food in my house. And test me now in this, says the Lord of hosts, if I will not open for you the windows of heaven, and pour out for you a blessing until it overflows. Then I will rebuke the devourer for you, so that it will not destroy the fruits of the ground, nor will your vine in the field cast its grape, says the Lord of hosts. So the principle here, at least, is we're trying to establish, all we're trying to establish now is the principle of giving. God says, give and you'll be blessed. Matter of fact, it establishes that a sowing principle in the New Testament, that what you sow, you what? Reap, okay? You sow a couple kernels of corn, you can have, a couple plants come up and get some ears of corn. You sow more, you get more. And so it establishes that, and God says, bring it into the storehouse, because that's the way that, that life functions. There's a life principle of sowing and reaping. There's a life function that if you're going to have something and grow something, it basically takes finances, it takes a giving, it takes food, it takes something to build a business or whatever you're talking about, right? So we understand it's nothing more than right now is establishing a principle of common sense. But we want to take this to a really deeper level. We want to jump in the New Testament just for a minute, and then we're going to give you 5 principles of finances. Now, finances is a dangerous area to cover because people get offended when you talk about finances sometimes. Just like politics, just like religion, just like race or something like that. It's an area that can offend people. Today, though, I think that when you walk away, you should have in your bulletins a handout that gave the 5 financial steps for balance. And we're going to cover those, and I really trust it's going to help you. Several people in the first service came up afterwards and, man, this was great. I can't believe it was just what I needed today, which was amazing to me that God brought it up today. So with that statement, let's take a look at a couple verses that Jesus gave. Matthew chapter 23 is a famous chapter. I always title chapters, and obviously, I've memorized a lot of verses and that, but the chapters, 1 Corinthians 13 is the what chapter? Love chapter. Okay, Hebrews chapter 11 is the what? Faith chapter. Good. Kudos. Matthew chapter 23 is, anybody know what it is? It's the woe chapter of hypocrites. Okay, it's about hypocrisy. It's about being phony. There's a reason I'm showing you this verse, because it really is important. Woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin. Now what is mint, dill, and cumin? They're herbs. They're just things that make things taste different. You put a little taste in it, right? You have flour and you put some taste in it or something. So get this. He says, what you're doing, you hypocrites, is that you're taking just the herbs. He's not talking about tithing something big like, okay, you got a salary and you tithe that. He's not talking about you grew a whole field of corn or wheat or something and tithing that. He's taking just your little section over here that's your herbs. You got me? You got to have a little herb garden. You could have it in your windowsill of your house at the kitchen, Some people do that. Does anybody have a little herb garden in here? Well, okay. So, so much for that part. So you have this little herb garden. You have your dill. You have your mint and that. And he says, you guys, listen to how legalistic they were. You even tithe this little herb over here. Follow me? Because look what he says now. For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and you have neglected the what? The weightier provisions. Something more than your tithing of these little things, something more than this tithe thing is your walk with God in these areas, your provisions of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. These are the things you should have done, the tithing up here, done without neglecting the others. You should never have neglected these, but you're neglecting some heavier things. So I don't want you to get the idea that giving, if you start giving all of a sudden, you become a super saint. You get a little halo on your head, You could wear a big cross on your back or something. It's not the big issue of your life. The big issue, he said, you should be doing all these things, but let me tell you, these were more important. That you walked and let me expand it a little, because I think this is what Jesus is saying. That you walked justly, okay? That you walked in your faithfulness to God, that you're a trusted person, that you walk in your love, that you walk in forgiveness, that you walk in mercy, that you walk like this as a believer in your relationships with people and with God. Follow me? That's what he's saying. And it's very good. So giving, but this is also being said, giving is a part of it. It's just not as important as love. We know now by faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. Okay, 1 Corinthians 13:13. So with that said, this is still part of it. Now let's take a look at Luke chapter 16. And we're going to start in verse 10, but let me explain the first 9 verses. He talks to a steward. Now understand what a steward is. What kind of man? Probably the building of a house or that, and it has that word, that's the original word, and it has the idea of a manager that is taking care of the affairs of the household. You follow me? So if you were taking care of the affairs of a farmer's land, you were a steward. And your job then was to be responsible, was to be faithful with the possessions of that farm and to take care of them. Now, in that text, that's the text you read where he calls a steward in and he says, give account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest no longer be steward. Why? Because he wasn't faithful. He wasn't taking care of what his master had given him. Now, with that said, this text now, as the first text was so relational, this one kind of gets in a little area of business and that, you might say, in that, but it's this, that God has given you possessions and a stewardship of what he's given in your life, the whole area. And you're expected to be faithful in it. Follow me? If you read through from verse 1, you said that this is very clearly this relationship of being faithful with what God has given you. So the question comes, are you faithful in all these areas? Are you faithful in all that God has given you? Look what he says here now in verse 10. So this is important on faithfulness. We're going to go read 10 through 13. He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. That's observation in life, but Jesus is the one stating this. And he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is also unrighteous in much. And remember, righteousness and unrighteousness, dikaiosune, is the word that means to be right. So if you're unrighteous, you're not right. So if you're not right in some things, you're not going to be right in a lot of things. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the use of the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust the true riches to you? If you're not faithful with money, if you're not faithful, what he's saying, if you're not faithful in the things God gives you, so God gives you a family, you need to be faithful in your family. It's going to get a little deeper here on some concepts. So, and if you're not faithful in that, who's going to give you your own? Verse 13. Oh, did I not read this? And if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? Almost the same thing. Verse 13. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Many translate that as mammon. So what's he saying here? You make a decision who's really Lord of your life. Who runs your life? You know, think about that. Jesus is talking here, and he says we need to realize fundamentally just a simple concept in this area of giving, in this area of managing all that God has given us in life. His talents, his possessions, your job, your finances, all of it, okay? You're managing it. And get a good grasp of this, because he says you're supposed to be faithful in it. And in this, you can't make possessions, you can't make people, by the way, you can't make money your master. Master has to be the Lord. And you need to allow him to be Lord of your life. And that's what Jesus now is teaching here. So he's really expanding that concept of just tithe. He's expanding the tithe of giving, that it's relational, it's there's promised blessing, there's faithfulness in it, there's responsibility in all that we have. And so you go to apply for a job. The employer, with any type of sophistication, is interested in your skill set. You know, if you're supposed to be climbing ladders, they hope you can climb ladders. You know, if you got a bad leg or a bad arm and you can't climb, you know, kind of this is not the job for you. You got it? If your job has got to be teaching and communicating well, they want to make sure your skill set is communication too. Okay? Well, so we've got to understand that in our relationship with God. This is part of the skill set that you're supposed to have in your relationship with God, if you would, you know, accept that term that I'm using, and that this is included. Now, what I want to go to now is 5 principles. You should have that in your bulletin. Back 30-some years ago, when we were starting the church, we started by faith. We believed God wanted us to start the church. We had no job at this time. And we had been a youth pastor, and I had gone from a youth pastor and traveling in evangelism to that we believed God wanted to start the church here. We had no income, really had no money. We started purely by faith. We had no other churches supporting us. And when we started, it was rough go. You know, the time you just didn't have anything. And my wife came to me one day and said, how much money do we have to go buy groceries? This is a pretty common thing. And we said, well, $1. You know, I checked the balanced checkbook real quick. We have $1.80. Didn't go very far. She didn't even go shopping. She just turned around and said, well, shopping's done today. That's really breaks a woman's heart, I know. So I sat there in that time, and we realized, you know, how bad it was sometimes. And so we prayed. And you know, I read the Bible a lot, so I dedicated I'd start reading it again here, and we'd find out all the places that God promised blessing, places God promised, had principles of giving, receiving, and all that. And I categorized them, and I looked so that we would see that we wanted to be in a position that we were in a place that God could bless. Does that make sense? You want to put your life, you could draw a circle and say, where do you want to be? If inside the circle is a place of blessing and outside is not, where do you want to be? You want to be inside the circle, right? So I looked at all those verses. I read through it again, and I was, I came up, and what I did is I've narrowed down, and actually I have a whole series of lessons on it, more in depth, but I developed these 5 principles, and I gave them to young couples who were going to get married. And so this became part of the practice of that, counseling for when people get married. Why? Because back in the day, years ago, they would ask, and there would be books and magazine articles and stuff on the number one cause of arguments and disputes in marriage. And guess what it is? Finances, money, filthy lucre, you know. And it costs problems. And so I said, one thing we do is help. Try to help young couples as they go into this understand some things. So that's where this really started at. So let's go through. You can write the answers in. We'll go through this and be done. But it's actually pretty fast. The first one is give a little. You write in the word give. Now let's just cover the first set of verses there. 2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 7. Now this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must do just as he has purpose in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So a couple things here. Establish a principle of life. You know what you discover when you study the Bible? That practically all the principles you look at are really a principle of life. You find them in nature. You find them in creation. I've actually started writing a book on this, but it's still in the computer stage, and it's just there. But it's a great principle of understanding the concepts of God, because you see them all in life, everywhere you go. And this is one of them. If you sow, again, a couple kernels of wheat, you're only going to get a couple stalks. You want more, you sow more, right? So this is the principle that God gave in giving. Let's go back to 6, just so I can. If you sow sparingly, you will reap sparingly. If you sow bountifully, you reap bountifully. Common sense, you know that in all of life, right? That's the way it is. Okay, so God says that's the way it is here too. Now verse 7. Now how is this giving supposed to be, does he say? Well, do just as you purpose in your heart. You should be praying about this. You should have a purpose. You should be able to feel good about it, not grudgingly or not under compulsion. Some pastor gets up here and said, that's why you have, I don't think, ever seen me take an offering. I have a couple times, somebody wasn't here to do it, so I had to do it. But other than that, I do it because people are so offended by it. And so we're not into this thing of that we pressure people. I've known some people, they'll take one offering and then 2 offerings, and they didn't get enough, and they actually passed, passed the hat the 3rd time. Well, we don't do that here at all. We don't make it a big issue, but we want you to be right before God in it. And so we had a text in Genesis where this doctrine starts, and you need to purpose in your heart. Don't feel pushed. Don't feel do it, and you're grudgingly doing it. But you're supposed to be. God loves cheerful giver. Most of you probably heard this. The original word is hilarion. Hilarion is the word we get our English word hilarious from. And so that's why it's translated cheerful. You could translate hilarious, and I don't think it's a ha-ha, hearty, ha-ha, but it's we're supposed to be able to be happy about our giving. Now, Acts chapter 20, verse 35, Paul mentions this. I think it's kind of interesting what he says. He says this. He says, for the Lord taught us it's better to give than to receive. Now, you probably, most of us, if not every person in here, has had a time where you gave to somebody who was in need. You gave to somebody to bless them in some way, and it did, and it helped them, and you felt so good about it. Right? Matter of fact, sometimes when you receive, it's almost embarrassing, isn't it? Okay, it is for me and George. Sometimes somebody compliments you. You ever get embarrassed when somebody compliments you? Somebody gives, that you were in a position in your life that you just didn't have and they had to give to you. It can be embarrassing. It can be almost hurtful. And not that the person who gave to you had anything wrong with it, but you know how your heart is feeling, right? How you feel emotionally about it. So what this is saying, you know what God says? He says, if you're a giver, if you establish this principle of giving, then you're going to be it's going to help make you happy. It's actually, it's a joyful thing for you to give. And you learn that. I always use the example of Christmas. When I was a little guy, I would go to the Christmas tree and look for my name tags. What am I getting at? But as you get older, you find joy in giving to others, and when you become parents, you love to see the joy of your children as they receive. You love to see the people you love as they receive from you. So giving is a loving thing. Let's establish this principle here. It is loving. It is supposed to be happy. It is supposed to bring blessing to the giver and to the one receiving. Okay? The recipient. And that's here. So first principle we have is to give a little, and God here commands it. Now, let me say this. In life, we have this also. Some ways, for some reason, and I think it's personally because of being pushed too much by, TV evangelists or pastors who are asking for money too much or want to live with a lot. I think that is a definite problem, right? I mean, you just see how much they want. But let me give you something. When you go to the restaurant and you get done through eating and your bill is $10, the waiter or waitress is also expecting something else. What is it called? A tip. So you say, well, I'll give you a tip. Don't take a long walk off a short pier, But you're saying, no, okay, seriously, what is it? It's this. It's that years ago now, years ago, back, us who are a little bit more mature, what was the tip amount? 10%. Did you say 2? Yeah, you got to be loud here because I'm hard of hearing. I'm so mature, I'm hard of hearing. So then it went to, a few years ago, well, actually a couple more than that, it went to what percent? 15%. Now where is it? 20%. Right, you guys are smart. Yeah, and so you go to Red Robin and some of these restaurants now, we were there last week, and you slide your card, and you're hoping they don't take all the money out of there. And they have on this thing tip, and it's a sliding scale. Have you ever seen that? Like Red Robin? And now you go from 20, 18, 19, 18, 17, 15, 10, 0, if you're mad at the waiter or waitress, right? But bring it back up. So it has that on it. So this is a custom that's all the way back in Genesis that we read. You're appreciative, you're thankful, you're giving a tip out of your feeling of generosity. And that's what God is using in this, establishing for us in this. If you're not appreciative of God, don't give. Don't give. Just let them know I'm not thankful for what you've done. Yeah. We're thankful we go to eat, right? I know some people give more to kitty cats and dogs, and they come on the TV. I see, our kitty cats or, and poor dogs and that. And they give money. Every month they give money. Some people give more money to that than they do to God. There's another big issue. I'm sorry to bring this up to you. I don't want to cause anybody heartburn this morning in that, but it's taxes, the government and taxes. You go buy something. Now you're buying something, and they throw on an extra almost 9%, right? Come on, go ahead and talk to me on this because I want you to get this. And we give it. Matter of fact, you don't even think about it. It's so common now. You go in and you see it, and it's you're buying something for $90, and it's not $90. That's going to be $99, right? Matter of fact, you start calculating. Do I have enough money? You got to add that in there, right? Now, when you go out in labor, that the tax laws have changed some here in the last few years, and the new president says he's going to change it back and lower them back down like Reagan did. But you take this look at this. And they say, what is it? Usually it's been anywhere 10 to 15% state, 15 to 25% federal. The first kind of level of all of it is somewhere around 25% with the added on of Social Security, which can take it up, okay? And it can take it up another 8%, something like that. So that's payroll burden that you get hit a little bit, but most of the owner gets hit with most of the payroll burden, which is more taxes on them. And all companies have to pay payroll burden. So when you hear somebody didn't pay taxes, I don't know how they get away with this in the news. I just don't. They are paying taxes. I don't know how they do that. But anyway, that's clear. They have to pay payroll burden. You have to. You don't get away from paying some of those taxes. So with that said, and if you get, as an individual, if your company bonuses you, they didn't pay that, but you're paying the taxes for that, right? So taxes are paid. My point I'm making is whether you realize it or not, you're paying taxes. Matter of fact, when you die and you give the inheritance tax, it's called a death tax. That's one of the negative terms. But if you have too much, then you're paying taxes again. It's really quiet in here. But you are going to, I said I didn't want to bum you out. Nobody's crying, so we're doing okay. But my point is you're paying taxes. Now God said 10%. There's almost nobody else that does that. And that's kind of Old Testament law, and it kind of went under then the premise of the New Testament, more of a stewardship of all that you own. You realize you're responsible to manage what God has given you in your life. And part of that is giving. That's our first point, giving. It's that, to have a good spirit, and a good heart about this. Now the second one is this. It's pay a little. Pay a little. First one was give a little. Second one is pay a little. Let's look at Romans 13. Wherefore it is necessary to be in subjection. 13 verse 7. Therefore give to all what is owed. tax to whom tax. So there you got it. You got to give to everybody that you owe money to. Tax to whom tax, custom to whom custom, basically another type of tax, we'll say. Fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor, the 13:8, just the first part. Do not owe even one man, not even one thing. So if you have debt, you're supposed to pay all your debt. You're supposed to pay your taxes. You're supposed to pay bills that are very clear that it's what you owe. So you're going to come under, and these are principles. We're going to put these all together in about 5 minutes, but we'll pretty much be done with these 5 in 5 minutes. So give a little, pay a little. Third one is provide a little. 1 Timothy 5:8. 1 Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. You're providing clothes, food, housing, taking care of your family is ordered by God. Dads, you're the main one responsible for this. Biblically, it's clear from the beginning of the Bible all the way through. Men, you are the main one responsible for it. If you don't do this, it says you're worse than an unbeliever. Now, we don't want to get into name calling here, but you're supposed to provide for your family. If you don't, you're worse than the unbelievers. The unbelievers were the ones outside the faith, the one people thought of, these are the bad guys. These are people that haven't loved and come to Christ and responded to his message and that. God is saying here very simple, you are now, if you're a believer, if you call yourself a Christian, and you're not doing this, then you are worse than these guys that we call the unbelievers. So you better take care of your families. Okay? Take care of your family. All of them. Be part of... listen, very, very important statement here. Be part of the solution, not part of the problem. You don't have to do the whole thing, but you can be part of the solution, right? You follow me there? Because sometimes somebody puts too much burden on you, and I don't think God's trying to do that here. Give a little, pay a little, provide a little. The next one is save a little. Save a little. Proverbs 6:6-11. Save a little. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Lazy, we could say, you lazy person type thing. Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise, which having no chief, officer, or ruler, keep going, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond and your need like an armed man. Two things stand out. First of all, be a good worker, hard worker. Okay? Secondly, you save provision, you store them up and you save them. So you're saving and you're working hard. Now in this, notice what it says. I think it's verse 7. Go to verse 7. Please be. Okay. Which having no chief, officer, or ruler. If you go to the ant, every now and then we have ants. I live in Ramona. We live on, the 10 acres, and we have ants invade. Probably they get together, and I mean, a bunch of them get together. It's not 5 or 6 of them. I'm telling you, we got 1,000. They get together and have a little powwow and say, let's go hit the Joneses. let's go bag some of their syrup, their pancake syrup. And they make this line. And they have this long line, and man, we can follow that line, and we follow it all the way to this cupboard, and then from this cupboard to the sink, and from the sink up here, and then the sink someplace out the wall, and man, there are a bunch of them. And they're these little thieves. And you know what we never see, though? You never see rulers or chiefs or officers. You never see one cracking the whip and say, Tanya, get some more of that syrup. You never see one saying, hey, Raul, you're not carrying enough. Pack a bigger load. You're bigger than that, You never see them ordering other ants around. They don't need to. They all know, right? They're all workers, man. Hey, let's get the grub and get it from the Joneses. There's moonlight discount. Let's do it tonight. So they don't do that. And so they have it, so they know they have to work hard. Principle established many times in the Bible, and they know they have to save it up. Okay? We're going to come back to kind of all these in just a minute, but and end it here. The last one is that you need to enjoy a little. Just write down enjoy a little. Ecclesiastes, we're only going to look at one of them here. You should have all these verses that were provided. Ecclesiastes 5:19. Furthermore, as for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, he has also empowered him to eat from them and to receive his reward and rejoice in his labor, for this is the gift of God. Wow. God says you're supposed to be able to enjoy some of what you have. You know, you're supposed to be able to be happy and enjoy. It's a God's gift for you to be able to buy some good things for yourself. Okay? It's God's gift for you to be able to party every now and then. I just always ask you, and I'm hardly taken up on this, but remember your pastor when you have the party. And, he likes the party too, Okay, so that it's your reward, it's your gift from God. Now get this. Now, I have for years wanted this. I told Ricky in the first service, I said, you've got to help me now. We want to write a book on this, the balancing the spiritual life, balancing our life spiritually. And you need to have balance in these 5 issues. Let me give you an example. Let me pick one here. Let's pick the last one. Enjoy a little. If you become a partner, you have to balance all 5. You need all 5 of these in your life, and they have to be balanced to an area that they don't get out of whack and affect the other ones. If you're one of these people that party too much, you get your paycheck and you go, yeah! And you just treat yourself really good. And you just get all kinds of stuff, and that you're going to ruin some of the other areas. You're not going to have money to pay your debts. You're going to have not money to buy food for the kids, and buy them proper clothes or when they need something. So you've got to keep that. You can enjoy a little, but not too much. Look what it says in Proverbs 21:17. You can add this to that verse. I kind of held off on this. But he who loves pleasure will become a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. Hey, you're going to party. You're going to, be a wino and really get into it. And you're going to get a bunch of oil and nice oils and perfumes and all that. He says, you're going to be poor. You're not going to be wealthy. You're not going to have. You're going to get out of balance. That makes sense to everybody? Okay, you're going to get out of balance. Now, we all know this one's true. What about somebody who gets too much debt? They buy a car, they buy credit, you get credit cards and buy too many clothes, and they buy too many gifts at Christmas time. I tell you for sure, people are suffering across America right now because they spend too much at Christmas. Right? Come on, everybody can talk. Yeah. Boo on Santa Claus. Boo on Santa Claus. The whole point is we know that, and then people, when you get out of debt, you're paying bills and you struggle, these other areas get affected. You're no longer in balance. These are biblical principles, and if you get out of balance and you're not able to live in the right, percentages and right effectiveness here, you get things messed up. All of a sudden, the other areas, you can't do anything. You get too much debt, you have too many other things, you can't have fun. You start feeling guilty if you do something, right? So you get out of balance, and then you can't do that. Now, we had a person out in El Cajon when I was a youth pastor. We knew her for years, and toward the end, I found something out that it was bad. She was the type of person who gave too much. You can give too much to God. I've heard preachers say you can't outgive God. Well, God doesn't expect you to do that. I found out a couple times she would come in and there would be a real burden in the church, and the church where I was youth pastor was not handled well, and so they were always having to ask for money when something came up because they didn't plan, they didn't save, they didn't budget. They didn't have a real budget in that, and you have to. You just have to, guy. And so they did, and so they would put out a plea to the church, and a couple times she gave her whole paycheck. So she didn't have food money, she didn't have enough to pay rent. And then a couple times the church had to come in and bail out, help pay rent so she'd have a place to live. But that is foolishness. Don't do it. You even have to give your giving in line. Now, God didn't say give 100%. He didn't say, the 10%, but then it says be a steward of what God has given you. And he wants to make sure you're responsible and you are faithful in the giving of that. You have to save a little. Now, under save a little, you can get out of balance and save a little. We have some people who are savers. Boy, they want to put it away. They want to put it in the sock. We have other people who are spenders. Charge, yay, charge. And they're ready to do that, right? So you got to have this in balance. So you have the savers and the spenders. And and you have some people that are the workaholics. They work, and they want to save. So they have this issue that creates a problem in their marriage and in their finances. So this point here is what I'm going to give you a verse right now because there's two parts of saving. One of them saves you from when you have troubles. If you're not saving some money when all of a sudden you're sick and you can't work and your paycheck is smaller, you're not going to have money to make it, right? Ask some of us who are older that have run into that problem. You get sick long enough and, boy, you're really in trouble. Have some unexpected expenditures that go out that are there, then you're not going to make it. So you're going to have to, a savings account saves you from problems. It also saves for retirement. That's going to be a time you just can't work as much. I just can't do as much as I used to do. I'm 64 now, and man, I tell you what, I can't work as hard. I go out, cut a tree down the other day, and I'm out there sawing yesterday, and that I got tired, and I decided I wanted to go in and party. I said, man, I done my share of cutting this tree down. I'm going to go in. I'm not going to eat any more sawdust. I'm going to go in and eat some donuts and some food that's healthy for me. So enough of that nonsense. But let me give you this verse now. Proverbs 14:4. Look at this. Where no oxen are, the manger's clean. But much revenue comes by the strength of the ox. So this is talking about investing. You're going to have to sometimes invest a little for future growth. If you don't get an ox, you don't have any more increase. Let me tell you a problem with a lot of people in finances, they don't understand a couple things. One of the biggest things is you have to make things work for you. Because if you're the only one working for yourself, you're in trouble. If that's what you're doing, then you're in massive trouble. Because if you can't work, then nobody's working for you. And if you're just making it from week to week, you got to figure that out. But back when we had $1.80, when I told you that story, and I went through this, I began to realize this. I went to some seminars, and I learned some things, read some books, listened to some tapes. I just educated myself in the thing. You have to make the system work for you because the system does not work for you. If you have a problem with that, talk to me afterwards and I'll help you out with it. But the system doesn't work for you, so you have to make things work for you. You have to start doing something. One thing is you have to start saving money. You have to put it away. You have to make the ox work. The ox will work for you, but if you don't have an ox, it don't work for you. So I say, if we need an ox, we'll just hire Aaron. We got a couple guys in here we could hire to be our oxen, Oh, Big Joe. But, other than these guys, you got to get the system, you got to get things working for you is what this is saying. And so that's part of this saving things and putting it all together. Now, you need to stay in balance. Folks, you have to agree and admit that you're going to have people that get out of balance in this and that steal from the other things then, and you won't have success. And so put God in this picture. Realize he's given us some, and there's actually more principles, but we're keeping it to 5 today here that really you can keep things in balance. Because this, as I told you at the beginning, this is part pastoring and maybe part pestering. But if you recognize as a pastor what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to help you. Because you can get out of balance in any one of these areas, even in giving. You can get out of balance in debt. You can get out of balance in saving and being the person that you just want to save, and your family's going crazy. Why don't you? Why can't we go out and have some fun? The Joneses do. Sorry. And so balance your life in this. And really, spiritual life is all a balance.